Hello, and welcome to this There Is a God edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your close-to-death host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. Yeah, what can you say?
Nothing. That show's over.
Yeah. What else is there to talk about?
Nobody's listening to this. They're all just watching the play a bajillion times. It's all the content we need this week.
Yeah, Joe, when you put this online, you gotta link the play to it and say, watch this while you're listening to the podcast.
I'm just gonna put it for no reason in every article I write from here on out.
Forever. I thought about using the audio as the intro, but those are always awkward because you guys don't hear the audio, so it's just kind of like dead air. But, well, first, I should probably introduce you guys. Joe Oberle is a writer for purplePTSD.com and thesportspost.com and was in the press box on Sunday. And Luke Braun writes for purplePTSD.com. He also writes for VikingsTerritory.com occasionally and co-hosts the Pocket Protectors podcast. He was also at the game. I was the only one not at the game. So first, I just want to get
your voice is still sore.
I want to get your guys' perspective. It's kind of cool because I was at my sister's house watching the game, which is I usually watch the game either alone or with my dad. I get very weird about things, more so than usual, so I don't like to be around people, especially for games that have really high stakes, just because I can't really handle it emotionally. But it's cool that we have the perspective from home, and then Luke was in the stands and Joe was in the press box. So Joe, I know we talked about maybe last week or the week before about some of the etiquette in the press box and how you're not really supposed to emote or cheer for the Vikings or wear Vikings colors, and I immediately thought about what your reaction was in the press box when that play happened.
It was difficult. It was the strangest experience I've had there since I've been going there for a number of years now, and I mean I wanted this really bad, and I had a hole in the pit of my stomach when the game started, and then when the Vikings got up 17-0, I felt better. I was able to eat at halftime. It was nice. Came back, and then of course when they threw that 4th and 10 play, yep. the hole in the pit of my stomach returned, and I said, "Oh my God, this thing's over." And I started writing my "woe is me, here we go again" story. I was thinking about Lucy's snatching the ball away from Charlie Braun, or once again, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just over, and I gave him no chance. And I sat there even on the last play, we certainly watched it, and you're starting to do some writing. And all of a sudden, it happened right in that corner where the press box is, and I was kind of blocked, so I couldn't see his feet, but it happened, and I reached the guy next to me, Sam Ekstrom from Zone Coverage, and I'll never forget the look on his face. We both looked at each other like that. I don't know if you've seen the shot of Everson Griffin walking around
with his hands on his head.
So good.
Yeah,
that's what Sam looked like. We didn't say a word, and I finally said to him, "I don't believe what I just saw," and that became the lead of my story. But I at first went, I first looked for flags, and then I thought, I looked for the play to see if he stepped out, and I said, "Oh my God, I don't believe what just happened," because you're feeling just like everybody else there in Minnesota that it doesn't happen to us. So then it was really strange in the press box, because you're right, there's cheering is strictly verboten. You're not supposed to do it, and there was an audible noise when it happened in there. Even you could hear it, with everything going on, and there was some yelping or whatever. And I'm not going to say who names, but people in front of us embraced. They embraced, and we saw tears in eyes. And I'm looking at the guy next to me who's from Denver and is not enjoying it like everybody else is. And he was really taken aback. And I said to him after, I said, "Yeah, I tried to keep it together." He goes, "No, you did fine. You did fine." He goes, "I saw other people that I couldn't quite believe." And it was so out of character. But I mean, it was shock. it was absolute shock, and it was funny. Before the game, I was having in the media room with Mark Craig, who was on the show here once before, and I said to we were talking, and he's from Cleveland, and he's belly aching about the fact he wants the Vikings to lose because if the Vikings win, he has to take off for Philadelphia today, Wednesday, and if they lose, then he doesn't have to go to New England until Saturday. So, I gave him hell. I said, whatever, Well, I go down to the locker room to get quotes, and we're all sitting outside, and I'm standing right behind him. I say, "Oh, sorry, Mark." He had to go. He took off today, and he just said, "Yeah, you bastards, these bastards." Anyway, so it was kind of fun. Anyway, I had to go back up, finish the story. I put the quotes back in and finish the story, and then I'm leaving, and I get outside of the stadium. I call my son down in Chicago, and I basically repeated the cover of the Time-Picayune's headline into the phone. Over
expletive.
Yes. And he's just laughing, and because he'd already said, he told me what he went through. But it was until that point, an hour later, that I really got to let it out, because you got, you're smiling and you're joking with people. But that one, you wanted to scream, and I'm sure, Luke, you must have been screaming your head off.
I'm still a little hoarse from it.
And your voice was rough to begin with last week on the show anyway.
Yeah, that was a combination of sickness, and then I was also cheering a little bit at the Rams game that I went to. But it had recovered by about Friday or Saturday, and then I threw it out again immediately on Sunday. But I was in the stands. I had pretty good seats, and I was with my dad, my stepmom, and my dad's coworker. My dad's coworker had his phone out the whole time taking pictures and videos of the whole experience, taking videos of some of the fun plays, and he got Sendejo's interception. He got a really cool video of it from our perspective and everything. So as the game went on, we were cheering and hugging in the first half when we thought everything was hunky dory, and then we kind of felt it start to slip away. And I've watched 1,000 Vikings games with my dad, and we kind of both we know the moment when you've lost a game.
Yeah.
And for us, it was the Keenum interception to Marcus Williams.
Yep.
The second that happened, and then it's Saints ball on the 30, and they're down 10. We're we've lost. We looked at each other, and we could just feel that we had lost the game.
Really?
Totally.
It was creeping away then, but you felt we had lost it?
I did.
That was the vibe,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. If I hadn't been at my sister's house with my entire family, I would have turned the game off and left, or gone for a walk and smoked a whole pack of cigarettes.
Yeah. So
I was really angry about the missed field goal before the half because I felt like that's going to come back to haunt us. And then the blocked punt one was when I basically just stood in the kitchen until the final play. I was in the kitchen listening.
We weren't even surprised at that. We were looking at that oh, okay, so this is what we're going to be complaining about now for 10 years.
Totally.
That, and then the 4th and 10 conversion to Willie Snead.
Yeah.
Where he just dusted Mackenzie Alexander, who had been playing 15 yards off that whole drive for some reason. And we were, sitting in the stands watching that, we were looking at Mackenzie Alexander, playing way far off, why is he so far off? Oh my God. And then he'd get targeted, every play on that drive. And then, we stopped him on 3rd and 1. They kicked the field goal. We had 25 seconds left. And I was I don't know, man, we have a chance, but I don't know. And my dad's coworker, Steve, who I think he actually listened. So hi, Steve. He was no, we're going to win. We've got this. He never wavered the whole game.
Wow.
And, they line up for the play, and he throws it, and Diggs catches it. And the first thing I hear is my dad yelling, "Go out of bounds."
Yeah. And
then he doesn't, and we realize he didn't, and that he's going, and then I blacked out from there. I don't remember what happened for the next 5 minutes. I looked at my phone. We were just jumping and screaming. I was hugging strangers, and it wasn't sometimes you'll be at the game and you'll be with a fan, you'll give them a big old yeah, and you'll hug after a touchdown. These were deep emotional embraces, like a relative you haven't seen for a year,
Yeah.
And these were true hugs, and we were just jumping and screaming, and everything was crazy. And then they played it up on the video board, and we saw his feet not go out of bounds. His knee not touch the ground. And, basically in our minds, oh my God, they're going to confirm it. And and then we were jumping up and screaming and just going crazy. And Steve, who had his phone out the whole time, actually turned around and got a picture of my dad and I as the play was happening, as we saw Diggs break away for the touchdown. So it's, if you go to my Twitter at SpokenFlow22, it's the pinned tweet right now, is a picture of me and my dad realizing, and everybody behind us too. There's a bunch of great faces in that picture, realizing that Diggs is going to go score a walk-off touchdown.
Wow. I'm going to actually steal that and put that
incredible.
on the podcast page so people can go to Purple
Yeah, do it.
and see that picture. Because that's
do it.
amazing, man. That's like pure joy caught in an image, and it was such a weird thing because there was such a wide range of emotion, from sadness mixed with anger and joy in like a minute span. For me, I literally spent probably the majority of the fourth quarter in my sister's kitchen, which was adjacent to where the television was, so I could hear it. But I was my oldest niece was in the back room watching YouTube videos on TV. And so I just wanted to interact with her because I was like, I can't, like you said, Luke, I just had that feeling. Like, I've seen this before. I know what's going to happen. And what happened was, superstitiously, my dad had been in a recliner the whole game, and we switched at halftime. So right before we got the ball back with 25 seconds, he told me to come back, and he said, I got to sit but I'm going to sit here because everything's gone bad since you took my chair.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so I sat down and was watching the game, and my mom just kept screaming, no, like, no. And so me and my dad thought like there was a flag or he stepped out of bounds or something bad. It took us like a minute and a half to realize that it was kosher and that we'd actually done something that has really never been done before in the history of the NFL. I didn't realize that at first.
Never a walk-off touchdown in regulation in a playoff game.
You know, it was just... Well, I said this off air. I didn't expect it to be, and Joe was kind of joking about this when we were chatting before the show, since I'm the guy that always complains about national coverage of the team and how I like seeing them on ESPN and NFL Network and watching the highlights over and over and over again. Yeah, I was surprised just by the sheer mass of memes and just how big it was.
Joe, if you go around and see some of the things they have out there on broadcasters and network people reacting to it. I mean, the one on NFL Network, Trey Wingo. Trey Wingo on ESPN was he couldn't get enough of it. I mean, he just was gushing about this play on their show afterwards. And the other three guys are football players from other teams, but Trey Wingo was just, my God, this is incredible, and just going on and on and on. And they're all kind of staring at him. But then he had Michael Strahan was jumping out of his coat that he was wearing, and it was and you saw it was so fun.
I like Scott Hansen's was my favorite, screaming like a Beatles fan circa 1967.
Yeah. What's funny for me was you see Strahan doing this, and they pan over, and there's the Louisiana native Terry Bradshaw putting his head in his hands.
Yeah.
God, it was wonderful. I mean, it was just It's never happened. You've heard all this. You've said all this. I mean, everybody said all, but it was such to have to go through what we went through right before that was incredible. I mean, I'm counting down a kid, and they got to hold them 4 plays, and they got to 3 downs that they stopped, and to have 4th and 10. This guy, one more play, and it's over. The game's over right there. And then to go down after that, you knew it was, they were going to make the field goal, and I didn't have any confidence of Kai Forbath hitting a long one, but that third down stop by the defense was huge, from Anthony Harris who came in for the injured Zendejo, and him and Robeson stopped Ingram. I mean, that was incredible. That
was such a great play by Harris. Robeson was just kind of in the way, but Harris came around the edge and just burst into the backfield to make a stop behind the line of scrimmage.
But, I also kept saying, what was
Marcus Williams?
What was he thinking? What was he doing? Was he trying to avoid a PI? That's all I could figure out, because to duck down at that point, he didn't
said anything? I know I saw his post-game stuff, and I saw that he said he wasn't going to let the play define him. And you had to feel bad for him because you could tell that he had been crying, and the report was that he collapsed on the way to the locker room and had his head in his hands and was crying in the locker room. And he handled it really maturely for a guy who's, turned 21 like 3 weeks ago. I kind of subscribe to the theory that they took that time out before the play, and the word is that Peyton kind of reminded them, don't get a pass interference because that'll set him up for, obviously, stop the clock and set him up for a long field goal. And I feel like maybe he just got there too early, so his instinct was just to drop his shoulder. I was looking, Luke wrote an article breaking down the play specifically, which we can talk about here, which is a good segue. But in it, that he shared a tweet where it kind of shows the X's and O's as the play happened, and it's like dots.
That's from Next Gen Stats, by the way. We should cite it because Next Gen Stats is all proprietary and stuff, and it is awesome. I really hope that they open it up for purchase at some point because it's really cool. They have tracking chips in the shoulder pads of every player. Wow. Which is how they have that.
Okay, I was wondering.
So they did this. Yeah, they did it for the 4th and 2 stop in the Philadelphia-Atlanta game. They did it for a couple of the other key plays in the other games and stuff. It was a really cool thing that they kind of unleashed on divisional weekend, but they had that for the play, so you could really see the X's and O's of views.
Yeah, and it really did look like he got there early, especially from that
view. He made a pretty crucial mistake in driving on the ball because he's the cover 2 safety. His job is to be, the deepest guy. So really what he should have done is just he was strafing on about the 30. The ball was caught on the 35. And he was strafing about 5 yards behind that, and then he drove on the ball trying to contest the pass. But then instead of actually jumping and contesting the pass, maybe trying to make a play and like upend Diggs, he would have fallen in bounds and been, downed in bounds, and that would have been, the clock would have died. Maybe he was trying to avoid a PI. I think he's probably just a kid trying to make a play, the biggest moment of his life. He's just a kid trying to knock him in bounds or cause an incompletion and, make a game-saving play. He had already made a huge one in the game in that interception. But what he should have done is continue to strafe on the 35 and then attack the receiver after he had caught the ball to get him in bounds and just strafe your way all the way to the sideline so you have the right angle to do that. But instead, he drove on the ball to contest the catch, and then at the last second decided not to contest the catch. And then he went lower than I think he didn't expect Diggs to be that low, and part of that is because Case Keenum threw the pass really high, and I don't think he was expecting that.
Yep.
So, that's where the act of God comes in, where like the Case Keenum miss actually ended up being the key factor in the play.
I think I like Terrence Newman, makes that play. He knows to wait and let, maybe perhaps he knows where he is on the field, says, okay, catch the ball, I'm going to get you down in bounds, and then let the clock run out. And this is a rookie in his first playoff game in a huge spot. They have got a number of young guys on that defense that I can see it happen. I felt bad for him, almost immediately. He's getting death threats and stuff like that. It's like, come on.
Did you see the Saints plane touching down and like re-arriving in Louisiana, and all the people that greeted it, and they all had posters like "We still love you, Marcus." And it was like this really reception.
That was it reminded me of the kind of the response to the Blair Walsh thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Scott Norwood, I think, is the prime example of that. Like Buffalo stood behind him for like 3 more years after he missed that kick.
We had kindergartners send Blair Walsh cards, so.
And I was, to be honest, this was part of the genesis of Purple PTSD because I was so salty about that freaking kick that I didn't want anything negative to happen to Blair Walsh, like personally. I didn't think he was a bad guy, but I didn't really understand the amount of like criticism from people who were like aggressively defending him in a really ironic way. I guess it was like I was just upset that he should have made. I just kept quoting Zimmer, who said he needs to make that kick. That's all I was saying, and people were saying, get a life, and football's not that important, and you should kill yourself. And it's like, so you don't want him to feel bad, but you're willing to make other people feel bad for feeling bad about the kick? Like, it didn't make any sense. But that having been said, yeah, it's been really cool to see like that, and the Vikings fans' response to the punter in New Orleans.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Which was weird. I mean, I don't know where it came out of, the fact that he got back out there, probably took a nice painkiller in his rib cage and got back out. Punted really well. I mean, I don't know why. What prompted that?
Yeah,
I think the broadcast really highlighted it, and he was like clearly in a lot of pain the whole time, and he just like gritted out the whole game. Yeah. And I think in the end, he came out for that final weird extra point kneel down after the final touchdown.
Yep.
and he was on the field for it. And I think people that just like resonated with a few people who donated to it, and then the fact that a few people donated to it got posted to Reddit, and then like Vikings Reddit, and then it gained a little bit of steam there. And then like players noticed, and Morstead himself noticed and said, well, I'm actually going to just donate this all back to something in Minnesota. And then it kind of snowballed from there.
Did you hear what he said when he got out there for that extra point? He just kind of walked out there with the other guys, looked at Keenum and says, "What's up, guys?" He's got a big kick out of it because
well, that's the painkiller talking too, I'm sure.
Exactly. I totally
being a part of that skull chant, but while they were waiting for the Saints to come back on the field, being a part of that skull chant led by Case Keenum that Keenum started was a magical moment that I'll never forget. Like that was the moment that I was like, okay, Case Keenum is my quarterback for as long as he wants to be.
And that's really a good. I want to kind of Luke, you wrote a really great piece breaking down the play itself, and I want to touch on that. But before that, I didn't include this in the agenda, but it kind of organically came up, and I was thinking about this as well. A lot of the focus has been kind of comparing Case Keenum to Joe Flacco and saying, if he the article I read earlier said the NFC Championship game is basically the difference between him getting like a stopgap $15 million contract, franchise tag situation next year and getting a stable like multi-year $20 million contract. And I was wondering, Joe, I think you have a really good perspective on this because to plug the chat, which is awesome because it's mostly me and Joe and there's all that icy tension. One of the first things you said is that you noticed that Teddy Bridgewater was near where you had checked in at the stadium, and if you want to explain that a little bit in regards to the Case Keenum thing too, since that's kind of ties into it.
It was really strange. I was walking, I checked into the media line, and you have to walk around the back to the media entrance, and before you get to the door is the players' entrance from the parking lot, which is on the west side. And cutting right across in front of me as I was, cutting across the entrance there was Teddy. Was coming in, and I've seen him many times in the locker room, and he is just always upbeat, even through all this stuff going on. But the man had a grim, very un-Teddy-like look on his face, and I thought, oh my goodness, he's not dressing. And I went up there, and by the time I got to the seats, they had put out the inactives, and sure enough, he was inactive, and Bradford was quarterback number 2, and it was just sad to see because you wonder what that means, obviously for now, but for going forward for next year, there's got to have some effect on him. Do they not feel like he's as healthy as Bradford? And Zimmer said after the game, he said that he kind of was really terse about answering the question. He says, I felt like Bradford had played against this team and done well.
Yeah.
So I made that decision, and he didn't want to go any further with it.
On the broadcast, though, not to interrupt you, but they mentioned that Zimmer had said before the game that he wanted Bradford in because he was a better passer, and that if Keenum tanks, he has more faith in Bradford coming in and running the offense. Was basically it was said in a way that kind of supported the theory that Zimmer, in a Parcellian way, is like putting these thoughts into Keenum's head to give him some edge because he seems to think that he plays better when he's uncertain or, super anxious. But that's the quote that they said on TV.
Interesting.
I'm not a huge fan of these conspiracy theories. We'll find out what they do in the offseason, but I think anybody who claims to have like a solid idea of who they're going to hang on to based on like who's starting is just making crap up.
Well, to a certain degree, but because Zimmer is, he's an honest guy. He is, and he tends not to say anything if he doesn't want to tell you something he doesn't want you to know, rather than to lie or that. And you always have to, just like you do with Donald Trump, don't listen to what he says, see what he does. And this was a bold move. I thought at the very least you might address all three, and because Teddy's been practicing for how many weeks, and Bradford has had 2 weeks. And even Zimmer said before going in, he said that I don't know what I'm going to do. The guy's only gets like 5 reps or here and there. He's not practiced that much, and it muddies it a little bit. There's other people that are saying he's throwing smoke to He's going to keep Teddy, and I don't know, maybe have someone go after a different quarterback. I don't know, trying to mess with people that are going to come after any one of his 3 unsigned quarterbacks. So it's a funky thing. Nobody knows. You're right, Luke. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, watch what the guy does, and that was a pretty bold move, knowing what we knew up until that point.
It was also bold just because the last time we saw Bradford, he was obviously too injured to play. So thinking that, say Case Keenum goes down, you put Bradford out there, he hasn't played in a game situation. Maybe it looks like he did, or maybe a little bit better than he did against the Bears, which was a disaster. Just carrying 2 quarterbacks seemed kind of risky as well. I know the odds are kind of with them in that regard, but still, that was something that kind of stood out to me too.
While we're on the subject of quarterbacks, I'd love to talk about Keenum in this game, because I think a lot of people really, really, really think lowly of his performance, especially in the second half. But upon rewatch and a lot of the study that people have been doing over this game and like what I've looked at, actually I really didn't hate how he played in this playoff game, which is kind of a big deal. It's kind of like one of the things I was really waiting to see is how he would perform on this stage. In the first half, there were a lot of throws that I think were, not only like good pocket plays, but really good throws, and I think better ball placement than he's had on the season by a little bit. Better than usual ball placement, and his inconsistencies usually stems from like these rainbowy throws that are consistently rainbows, and they just have like super inconsistent results. And we saw that with like following up that really putrid interception with just this beautiful teardrop to Jarius Wright was his next throw after that on a huge 3rd down conversion that set up a field goal to make us go up 20-17, I think. Or 20 to.
That was an incredible pass.
20-14, I think, was the score after that. That was a beautiful pass. And there was one in the red zone in the first half to Diggs where he like rolled out. He had all day to throw, but he like rolled out of the pocket and threw back across his body and just threw this like perfectly placed strike where he was in triple coverage, but still somehow none of those 3 guys had a shot at it. I really like the way that he played in this game, aside from like that one interception and then a couple other times where
he threw a rainbow to Rudolph on the sidelines that should have been picked and would have ended the game had he done so.
Yeah. There were a couple, but he has that every game. Like I'm over that, like that just always happens. There was one moment that isn't being talked about that I do want to highlight, and I believe it was in the final drive. It was the play, the 2nd and 10 play before the miracle play. Jarius Wright wide open over the middle, but 2 safeties behind him, and he probably wouldn't have scored. Would have been tackled in bounds, and that would have been ball game. And instead, he chose to try to check it down. I think that was the one to Rudolph that went over and sailed.
Yeah. It was.
So decent restraint to not throw that. Game situation awareness, which I think as Vikings fans we're used to like really dumb things happening in these crucial situations. So I thought that was a really nice. I thought it was a nice performance by him. Maybe I'm talking him up a little bit too much. It was certainly flawed.
I'm not saying. I would agree with you. I just those 2 stick out in my head. The obvious interception that was total panic, and then that throw to Rudolph could have. There was 2 guys over there too, and the other guy almost picked it off going out of bounds. But I think he threw it enough that it wasn't going to, but it was darn close in that situation. But yeah, you're right. It's a good decision not to throw it across the middle.
So, well, Joe, you wrote a couple articles about the game, and I don't remember which one specifically you said this.
What's sober and not sober?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite article by you ever, the Drunken Soliloquy article, which people should check out. Obviously, the game was a tale of 2 halves, and the Vikings got the ball to start the second half. They had a damn near 10-minute drive, didn't score any points, but it was essentially 17-0 with 4 or 5 minutes left in the third quarter, and then things on offense obviously slowed down a little bit till the end of the game. In your article, Joe, you talked about the difference between the line in the first half and the second half, and all the pressures and sacks that Keenum took in the second half. Do you think that's what changed the sort of, I don't want to say unstoppable, but like the flow of the offense in the second half? Or what was offensively the determining factor, you guys think?
The line did just not play as well in the second half from that point on. I don't know caused the change. They didn't run block as well, and they didn't protect as well, and panic was setting in. I mean, you had the I think the injury certainly threw the entire team for a loop because Xavier Rhodes lost his shit and just kind of had to be taken. I mean, I'll love him to this forever for Linval Joseph pulling him away.
Yeah.
And basically telling him, man, you got to get your head back in here, dude.
And Zimmer did it too.
Yeah, Zimmer did later on the sidelines and calm him, but it's like that's a leader who says, fine, yes, they hit our guy, let's go, and but the next play, Rhodes gets beat for a touchdown. And so then all of a sudden doubts creeps in. And then the next series, wasn't the next series that he throws the interception and suddenly they're...
He threw a pick right after that. And then
the next one was the punt block.
And after that, then, I think you're panicking. I think, dominance, that you're gaining confidence, and suddenly, the second half, the other team is all of a sudden, the momentum is all on their side. And suddenly, Cam Jordan is just going to try to eat you up. And he was starting to get past Rashad Hill at times. And I don't, they sucked it up. And on the final play, they were still in there, blocking and doing well and give Case Keenum time to throw that pass. But, they just really seem to take a turn for the worse there, and I'm not exactly sure why. It's other than emotional.
What do you think, Luke?
It was a little emotional. I think there was a game plan issue or like a strategic issue that happened.
Yeah.
They talked about this a little bit on Norse Code because I sent in a question about it because I was curious, but they were like mostly in man-to-man coverage of the defense the whole first half, and they shut them out. And then I guess preemptively they went to zone coverage. And on the other side of the ball, the Saints were doing something very similar. They were going to man-to-man coverage and getting like just torched by Stephon Diggs on like crossers, and Jarius Wright was getting open and Thielen was getting open, and they weren't like holding up in man-to-man because of the constant. Like the Vikings just kept using really good, well-executed man beaters. So I think preemptively they thought, well, they're going to look at that tape and go to the same man beaters we're using. So let's go to zone. So kind of stay one step ahead. And the Saints just kept running screens. And what happened is, when you get in those zone looks and then they run a screen, you only have one guy in the flat and they have two blockers out there and you're toast. And that kept happening. That's why Alvin Kamara, was able to like pick up these huge 13, 14 yard chunks. And then I think Michael Thomas turned on in a big way in the second half.
Love Michael Thomas.
He's so good. The touchdown where he beat Rhodes was a filthy route. He had another catch over the middle where he just turned Rhodes the hell around. And I don't know if any corner could have covered that the way Michael Thomas ran it. It was just this beautiful, immaculate route. And then the second touchdown where I think Rhodes was out of the game at that point because it looked like he had gotten concussed or he was being looked at or something. He was when he was down on the sideline for like 2 plays, and then they scored right away on Terrence Newman. They put Michael Thomas in the slot, knowing that Rhodes couldn't follow him there, and he ran this perfect slant, and Newman had absolutely no chance.
No chance.
Michael Thomas just turned it on.
And you guys called that too last week. Joe, I think you posed the question of whether or not Rhodes would shadow Thomas, and it looked like he pretty much did, except for with the exception of that play.
He did, because we just match up so perfectly. And Trey Waynes matched up really well with Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn could only really get production when he ended up on a safety in zone coverage. Trey Waynes had a pretty nice game.
And my big concern going into the game last week was the shuffle of the offensive linemen, and we talked about the strategy or the theory of putting your best players out there, as limiting the amount of time Searles has to play, which was my big concern like a week and a half ago. Where do you guys see that going into I don't want to completely segue into the Philly game yet, but with the game started and it looked like they were executing the game plan that we kind of talked about, which was handing the ball off to Murray and picking up yards and getting third downs that were short and high, as Luke says, high efficiency or whatever, high efficiency third downs. I just looked up his Murray's stats to see what his average yards per carry was, and it was pretty paltry. Does that concern you going into Philadelphia, considering how the field is and the type of defense that they play? Do you think they'll make changes at the offensive line, or do you think that they playing in that game, having the 2 weeks off and this week for practice, do you think, Joe, that that's something that can improve?
No, I don't think they'll make any changes. I think they made this change early last week. In the last show, I said I thought Paul Allen had kind of slipped up and let it out, but we are all expecting it anyway for Remmers to move over to left guard. And
I forgot about that.
And what's his name? Zimmer said some nice things about him over there. Said he did some good things in response to a question. And I think maybe they'll there's a defender, and I can't think of his name, who's really good on the defensive line for the Eagles.
Fletcher Cox.
Yes, and I think he moves around a little bit, I believe. So maybe they're
primarily a 3-tech. So if Remmers is at left guard, he'll go mostly against the guards in the center.
But that's good because they may want to help out Rashad Hill a little bit, but I think you're going to see the same lineup because it sounded like Remmers was very comfortable moving over there, which surprised me a little. And like I said, they started out doing a nice job, but it's amazing how things change when everybody adjusts at halftime, does different things. So I don't foresee any changing to that lineup.
And just real quickly, the final point on the Saints game that I wanted to touch on too was, I know, Luke, you kind of talked about how the defense shifted into more of a zone coverage, but it seemed like, I think on NFL Network, Deion Sanders does that. If you ball, you get the call segment, and he called Everson Griffin after the game, and basically Griffin said that he felt like the defense especially got complacent, and they felt like the game was in the bag, and obviously the team hadn't given up over 20 points at US Bank Stadium all season, so it kind of felt like the game was over at halftime. But how much stock do you put into that? How does it make you feel about the remaining games in the postseason? I wrote an article after I kind of calmed down and watched the Minneapolis Miracle play 1,000 times, and all of a sudden I got this nagging doubt that if we were to go to the Super Bowl and play the Patriots, I just felt like no lead would be safe. The Saints game reminded me so much of like the '90s era Vikings, the way that it played out. Obviously,
I think they'll treat no lead like it's safe anymore. Like, you have to imagine, like, this team's been really good at learning its lesson.
Yeah. From
2016, not getting complacent when you're winning a lot of games to messing up stuff in the Lions game, and they've been under Zimmer very, very good at learning how to handle themselves in a playoff game because the first one didn't go well, learning how to never quit, and I think under Leslie Frazier the team had a little bit of quit in it, and under Mike Zimmer they kind of learned to not be like that. Now they can do things like come back when you're down and you only have 25 seconds left and no timeouts. So I don't think that they'll be up 20 and they're not going to blow a 28-3 lead again, or if they do, it'll be because Tom Brady's just that good.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that was sort of like a teachable moment for them, they got away with it, and now they realize they have to keep their foot on the neck of their opponent the entire game.
Well, I hadn't heard that comment from Everson, and I got to take a little bit with a grain of salt, but he definitely. I'm voice knowing him to parrot just exactly what he's hearing from the coaches. So if the coaches said that to him, that they got complacent, that they were thinking, there's probably some of that. Maybe they're saying that, but by the same token, they were given a couple of short fields there that they had to defend to keep the Hall of Fame quarterback at bay. And I don't really care how motivated you are. It's really hard to stop the play when it's a screen and you're the defensive end and the screen's on the other side of the field and the only guy over there is Tom Johnson. That's just going to pick up yards. So there's a certain point where they made a strategic decision, a reasonable one, but Sean Payton got him, and that's why Sean Payton's a really good coach. So is Zimmer. That's what makes this game really good.
Yeah. We've said all season that this team is, or at least I've said it probably every episode, that this team is the most anti-Vikings team I think I've ever seen. We're talking about how the game felt familiar in the sense of they were going to blow it. There was a lot of indicators that the game was going to fall apart, and obviously they came through at the end. But But yeah, it was surprising to see that happen with how good this defense is. But Drew Brees is Drew Brees. They have an amazing offense. I did want to touch on one last thing, even though I already said that, about the play. And we didn't really get into it, so I want to plug Luke's article that breaks down like the X's and O's. Again, it's on purplePTSD.com. It's on our social media, so check that out. But Joe, off air, we were kind of talking about how excited we were about the play, and obviously you had given me the title of the wet blanket after my article about the Patriots earlier this week. But I know that you were kind of putting the play and the Saints game in the context of it doesn't mean a whole lot unless they finish the job, and I know that's something that you guys wanted to kind of debate. I kind of took the takeaway from you, but do you want to explain it a little bit better?
Well, that's basically it. I mean, it was wonderful. It was unexpected. It was thrilling and exciting. Like I said, shock. Whatever you want. But I think it's if they don't continue to win these next two games, first of all, this one coming up, it's just almost a footnote. You'll see it a million times. They'll play it every time they want to go back and try to write a narrative, just like they did with missing field goals before Kai Forbath went out there. They threw up all the Vikings missed field goals. You'll see it then, but it doesn't mean anything. If it leads to the Super Bowl, then it does, and if it leads to a Super Bowl victory, even more, it's going to go down as someone said they're going to erect a statue of Diggs out front of U.S. Bank Stadium. And I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, if they go ahead and win the thing out there, it's that kind of play because it kept their season alive, and a season that ended up, knock on wood, was totally legendary. So I just like they did it in the Winter Park today. I mean, all the national people were in trying to ask them questions about the play and what that does, and every one of them was batting them away like a racket, a tennis racket, saying, we're on to Philadelphia, which they have to be. They have to be. They've got a shorter week than the Eagles do. They played a day later. They have to get onto it and put that from behind them. But so in my mind, it's certainly time to do it. And that's by the time, I wrote my game story, and then I sat there and had a couple beers because I could not go to sleep. And so then I wrote, okay, enjoy it. It is what it is, but time to move on to Philadelphia because that's what Bill Belichick would be doing.
And I know.
Yeah, I get that. The idea that like this win didn't give you the Lombardi, right? There's work to do. And I do think the team, from what I've seen in their interviews, they did a kind of media conference championship media day, and they interviewed Diggs and Rudolph and Keenum, and everybody was like, yeah, it was fun in the moment, but now we've got work to do. But I think there's something about that play, the way that game went down. Even if we go and like get beat up by Philadelphia and we lose 27-10 or some totally forgettable score, and it's like this total letdown. That moment and the thing that we all experienced together of running around and hugging our dogs and hugging strangers and screaming and yelling and waking up the kids, like everything that we all just went through and we all remember where we like that will never be taken away from us as a fan base. I've seen a lot of comparisons of people like looking at oh well it was redemption, then they'll like play a highlight of Brett Favre's interception. And for the first time, I was able to watch that from the 2009 NFC Championship and like not feel anything, not feel angry or wistful, or not feel like what could have been, because it feels like that has been redeemed. It feels like instead of the Vikings being a team where we're always on the bad end of it, we're now just a football team, and that's just a thing that happens to football teams. You throw interceptions in late in playoff games, and that happens.
And it does feel like a continuation of that narrative from 2009, obviously, that carried into this game. And the feeling with 25 seconds left that the Saints were going to screw us again, and the play kind of wiping away. I agree with you, Luke, just in the sense that it almost doesn't feel like two separate things. It's just a continuation of the 2009 game, and then sort of a redemption that way. And I
don't feel like they're that connected. It's just that the fact that this happened means that I can now look at that old game and just be like, okay, it's just a playoff loss. Every team gets playoff losses.
I am not trying to say that it's ever going to be taken away. They'll always have it. We'll always enjoy it. Just like I enjoy looking back at the Ahmad Rashad one. I mean, I won 2 bets on
at the Met.
Yes, I won two bets at a time when I was in college and have money to bet on that game that they were winning the division, and one of them still hasn't been paid to me, by the way. But anyway, But for me, I have seen them come close more than you guys have, and I have. That's why I think I'm able to rebound from this sooner. You guys have never seen them play in a Super Bowl. I've seen them play in 4, and to me, there's nothing that I want more than that, for them to play in it and win a Super Bowl, because then I can, look at all those people that will say, well, how many Super Bowls you have, and just, you don't have to hear that anymore. That's the thing I'm trying to erase. You're trying, you make a good point. It kind of mitigates what happened in 2009 a little bit, even though that was a game they might have clearly won the Super Bowl, but they didn't get there. For me, that's the prize, and I know that's what the players think as well, because and they're trying to get rid of that and move on from that this week. So that's where I'm.
And I've never seen them win an NFC Championship game. I've seen them lose 3, and all 3 of them have their own characteristically heartbreaking, thing about it. Which is part of why I said, if they just lose an NFC Championship game and it's like particularly forgettable, it'll be the least painful of the 4 that I've seen, and who cares now? But they're going into an NFC Championship game that they have a pretty good chance at.
It feels to me a lot like
spoiler alert.
The 2000, and I wrote about this in my Wet Blanket article. I was like a junior or senior in high school, I think in 2000, 2001, and I really was obviously a huge Moss guy, so I just thought we could beat anybody with Moss, even though I didn't think the team was as good as they were in '98. I wasn't a big Culpepper guy, to be honest. But I looked at the playoffs that year, and I was really only afraid of the St. Louis Rams and the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they both lost either in the wild card or the divisional round, and we ended up facing the Giants in New York. And I honestly didn't think they stood a chance against the Vikings. They remind me a lot of how I feel about the Philly game. I want to segue into that by asking first, and you guys have touched on this, and it seems like the players and the coaches are really on top of it, but how much do you guys buy into the narrative of the emotional letdown from a game like that going into another game historically with teams kind of running out of steam when things like that happen?
Go ahead, Luke.
The emotional letdown.
Are you afraid of that?
If we lose, I don't think that would be why. The team's been through a lot of emotional. Like, if there were to be an emotional letdown, it probably would have been, it probably would have been on Sunday night. After, we went 13-3, we're so good, and then you get in, and then you kind of like tip over. But I think if we do lose, it would be, there's a whole bunch of other things we'd be able to point to, but before we point to they came out flat because they came off of this emotional loss. I think that happens to some teams, but those are teams with bad coaches, and we don't have one of those.
Yeah. I kind of noted this before the show, but it seemed to me like the media was talking a lot about that. About the Vikings and the emotional letdown, and I compared it to Jacksonville, that was so personally offended by the way the Steelers handled that game that they went in there with this vengeance, a personal hatred.
I could see it happening to Jacksonville because I don't really believe in Doug Marrone as a leader.
There you go, and they had that celebration at their stadium. I think over 10,000 people showed up where they kind of celebrated the fact they're going to the NFC Championship, which is it's the Jags, so. They haven't been there since the late 90s. I think that's the only time they've ever been there because they haven't existed for that long. But, I kind of juxtapose the two and seeing what's going on with Jacksonville and kind of feel like that's more of a case for them than the Vikings. But
I agree. I mean, the Vikings was an emotional victory, but, they were in that thing. They dominated the first half, and, it sounds like, according to Everson Griffin, they had a letdown in the second half emotionally or mentally, despite the plays that were run against them. So it's part of it. It's part of it. And whether or not I agree with Luke that they're well coached, they've had 2 years ago. Most of these players took it in the gut, in a playoff loss, and they almost took it in the gut again on Sunday. So I think there may be a sense of playing on borrowed money. We needed to get to this game, and we have so much at stake. They're going to come out, they're going to have gotten through whatever rust they may have picked up in that 2 weeks off that they had, and I think they're going to play even better. There are reasons I'm concerned about the game coming up. Just the number one, chief among them, is the field, the turf. But as far as emotions, I think they will be fine. I think Zimmer will have their heads on straight, and I think now Case Keenum's a playoff veteran quarterback, so you got to give him that. He didn't even really play like one in the first one. So.
Undefeated.
Undefeated in the playoffs. You can look at the Saints too as an example of this, because they came off a close Carolina game. It wasn't quite as astounding as this one, but it was like they were really emotional in the locker room, and then they came into the first half of this one totally flat. And then it took them a half to like shake that off, and then they got back in it, obviously. But the Saints struck me in this game as a team with a much less mature personality than the Vikings, just in the way that they celebrated. Like when Alvin Kamara caught that touchdown and they took the lead, there's like 3 minutes left in the game, and they were tackling each other in the end zone like that was the walk-off touchdown. And then Will Lutz made that field goal right before the miracle play. And they were, jumping up and down on each other like that was the game-winning field goal, even though there was 25 seconds left.
Peyton was doing
the skull chant, which is a hilarious L.
Interacting with the fans, yes. I brought this up last week, how they celebrated after they beat the Panthers. I mean, they were dancing in the locker room and just whooping and yelling.
And if you watch Everson Griffin's mic'd up, he was way more subdued than he usually is. And he was still talking and like doing his thing where he hypes himself up, like being John Randall and everything, but he was definitely like more business, more like it's never going to be. Even after 17-0, he was like, all right, let's go. We got to go beat him for another half. Like, this is a much more mature team. And they're not playing to get in the tournament. They're playing to win the thing at home.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, they've got so many more veterans. I mean, that whole defense, not the whole defense, but a good portion of the defense are new players to the Saints, and a lot of them are young players.
And their coach has no class.
Lattimore on that play on that pass by reception by Adam Thielen. Oh my God, what a catch! But he got 2 fouls thrown on him, holding and pass interference.
It's a dime of a throw too.
Oh, it was. It was incredible.
Right between double coverage between 2 defenders, neither of whom had a shot at the ball.
So, going into the Philly game, I was at one of my clients. It's a liquor store, and I was there during the Eagles game on Saturday, and probably talked to 100 different people, and they kept saying, "Well, I don't want to go to Philadelphia. I want to play Atlanta at home." And I didn't really say this last week, but I came to the realization that I would much rather play Philadelphia with Nick Foles in Philadelphia than try to beat Atlanta twice. They're in a stadium. They got kind of the sleeping giant aura around them, and there's the adage that it's hard to beat a good team twice or 3 times in the same season. How do you guys feel about the Eagles in general, either from that context or, comparing them to the Saints last week? We said the Saints are probably going to be the hardest game that we're going to play in the NFC, regardless of who we played in the NFC Championship. Do you feel like this is a lesser opponent, Joe? I mean, are you?
I don't. I think they're a much tougher defense than we saw last week against the Saints. The quarterback is quarterback's a Hall of Famer last week. He's not in Philadelphia, so I mean that's a big difference. So I think that makes it easier on that side of the ball. But they've got a decent running game. They've got a bruising running back. They got Jai, who really seems to be. However you say his name, he seems to be much more comfortable than he was when he first joined the team. I had him on my fantasy team and swore at him every week. But
me too.
They're at home, so that's going to be tougher. But I think they're not as well coached as. Maybe not by a whole lot, but as Peyton is. Peyton's a better coach. So I think they're going to be a really good test over there, especially since the Vikings will be slowed down on that carpet that is just in rough shape out there. And that kind of is an equalizer for both teams. But I think, I asked Adam Thielen today, I said, as a route runner, it's like, it's got to be, you're going to be missing the fact that you're not playing at your fast carpet here at home. And he says, well, no, we played in Chicago, we played in Green Bay, we're used to that, we know what to do. You just have to prepare for it, get out there ahead of time, and and see what's going to work for you, and then deal with it. So he doesn't seem to be taken aback by it, but that's still a concern for me.
Yeah, I think just quick on the field, that is definitely an equalizer because the Vikings are a much faster team.
Mm-hmm.
And poor field conditions are definitely, they bring down teams that have an advantage because of their speed, because it's just harder to be quick and change direction with suddenness. But Mike Zimmer said something about like needing the right cleats and stuff. The defense gave up its 3 worst games against Carolina, Washington, and Pittsburgh. All of those were on grass fields. But the other 3 games on grass fields were 16 points against Cleveland, 17 against the Bears, I think, and then a shutout in Lambeau. So we kind of have to ask ourselves, are we going up against Cam Newton or Kirk Cousins, or are we going up against Deshaun Kaiser or Brett Hundley? And I think we're a lot closer to the other end of it. Nick Foles is #not good. He is an okay backup. He's playing probably better than you can expect, like your average backup quarterback to play. He's not like Scott Tolzien or any of these disasters. But the Eagles hit him a lot against Atlanta. His average depth of target was lower in that game than any season average from any quarterback either of the last 2 years. And if you look at the big chunk yardage that the Eagles were able to get, it was on screenplays and slants, and a lot of the 12, 13-yard plays were play action, and then Alshon Jeffrey would run like a nice short slant or short post route underneath, off coverage, and the linebacker would have sucked up. I do think that in that Atlanta game, a big reason that it looked like the Eagles were like doing an okay job moving the ball is because Deion Jones was a catastrophe in that game. And conversely, he was really, really good against Jared Goff and the Rams. And then he just, he fell apart. He was biting on every play action. He was late to get to every screen. The longest play the Eagles accomplished through the air was a screen pass to Jay Ajayi that was thrown 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage.
Wow.
And I think that as well as the young Atlanta defense had been playing up to that point, they fell apart in that Philadelphia game. This defense is a lot more seasoned. The linebackers are a lot better than Atlanta's were, and hopefully we'll be able to stymie that a little bit more. What we need to do in this game is just be in our spots and create tight windows and, make Nick Foles. It's the cliche of like make Nick Foles beat you, but it's, give Nick Foles a hard job, but don't sell out to like stop anything. Just make it difficult and hope he fails.
I have a number. Luke.
A stat from Joe?
Yes.
Hit me.
Actually, it's from Pro Football Focus, but
whoa!
They came out with today that Case Keenum is, I think, 88.5 quarterback rating.
I was going to ask you guys about that.
And then he's a little bit higher. It's like
he's
100.
Yeah, like
100.
Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say he's over 100 indoors. I was going to ask you guys since you brought it up, and I like talking and hearing my own voice. What you thought the reasoning was for that? The temperature?
Because he's outside.
The Washington game?
Just in general, like why he
the Green Bay game. The Green Bay game, what was below zero, and that wasn't below zero, but it was darn close. It was not. It was.
That was possibly his worst game of the season. Maybe that or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I would say Pittsburgh, but yeah, the Packers game was brutal. It's not that cold in Philadelphia, luckily.
No, I just looked up what the weather's going to be. It's going to be like high 50, probably a little colder because it'll be at night. It'll be like in the high 40s, low 40s. That's actually really nice when you're wearing pads.
Just so you know. That's huge.
I looked it up I think yesterday, and the low was 39 degrees. So
it's not going to be a below zero game like the Lambeau game was. I think there's a tiny drop off when he goes outside, also because all those games are road games, and quarterbacks drop off on the road.
And division games. Some of them.
Yeah, but if you think about those games just anecdotally, like the second half when he came in Chicago, he played pretty well in that game. He played very well in Washington. He didn't play very well in Carolina, didn't play very well in Lambeau or in Pittsburgh. I think all three of those have pretty decent excuses, though, right? Like Pittsburgh, he found out he was going to be the starter that day. Lambeau was crazy cold. Carolina, I think, is probably the most indicative one. But even then, it was like at the end of this huge long road streak, and like, okay, fine, he didn't have a perfect one that time. He threw some turnovers. Like, I'm not particularly worried about Case Keenum like being in the elements. It's going to be like a partly cloudy 45-degree day.
Ice Bowl
I'm
2.
just hope Case Keenum doesn't turn the ball over, because if he does, the Vikings will lose that game. This is a defense that's going to jump on that, and you can't give Foles any other reason to. You can't give him short fields and let him luck into some scores that he might not have gotten against the Vikings defense otherwise. So if they take care of the ball, I think they're going to win.
That's how they couldn't function in the red zone either.
Yeah, so, well, they were operating in the red zone at like a legendary level during their winning streak. They were like, I think it was 75% of the time they were in the red zone, they scored a touchdown. I don't think it was sustainable.
Oh, I meant Nick Foles, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, oh, that's way too high, yeah. That definitely would come down.
It's like cryptocurrencies. It's just a correction. But, gotta plug them, because I got all my money in there, and I'm scared. How do you guys...
That's at the merit. Put $1 in the jar for bringing up Bitcoin on the podcast.
Every episode. We had 2 weeks ago was the Bitcoin episode. When it comes to the injuries was what I was going to bring up. Joe, have you heard anything about...
Sendejo's looking better to play.
And then, Shamar Stephen, I think he's going to be out, obviously. What are they going to do at defensive line? Is that a Jaleel Johnson?
Jaleel time!
Ooh, and Luke would like that.
Adam Thielen was on the injury report today. He didn't practice. He had got hit in the lower back in the third quarter on Sunday and came on a couple plays but finished. But it sounds right now just precautionary, but that's something to keep an eye on. Sendejo is his usual cranky self, but in the locker room. But he seemed, which I think was a good sign, because
same personality with a brain injury is probably.
That's right. So yeah, I saw Stefan on crutches, and I still haven't heard anywhere from anyone whether or not it is ACL. Some people have said that they thought they saw it, but he was walking around on crutches today, and the word is that he's probably done, but we'll see.
Yeah, I thought that was odd. Yesterday I Googled to try to find an update about his injury, and there was nothing. But
he was supposed to have an MRI on Monday, so I don't know what the deal is there, but I couldn't find anything else.
Are you I can't remember. I remember we talked a lot about Jaleel Johnson in the preseason and after the draft, Luke, but how do you feel about him stepping in? Or what they're going to do?
He hasn't gotten much of a chance yet, and I think it's because he hasn't been able to overcome Shamar Stephen in practice, but the few snaps he has played, he's been, in my opinion, a lot more disruptive than Shamar Stephen, especially in the run game. He's been a lot better at getting penetration and, messing up gap blocking math and stuff. So I would love to see a little bit of him. Ultimately, Tom Johnson's your starting 3-tech, and then Paul Joseph's your starter. Like, those guys are going to get the lion's share of the snaps, but from a rotational perspective, I'm excited to see a little bit more Jaleel Johnson.
So, I wanted to delay this till the end of the show because as Luke touched on, and Joe, you did too, neither Luke or I have ever seen the Vikings in the Super Bowl, and obviously we're one game away. It's almost surreal for me just because I look back at a lot of those games as defining moments in my life, and I rewatched, like Luke said, he rewatched the end of the Saints game, and so being in the moment the week before the game and how much stock I put into this, it just feels like, it's just kind of terrifying, to be honest. But Joe, I read your prediction article or your scouting report, and as per usual, and you've been right obviously more times than you've been wrong, you picked the Vikings to win, kind of in a low-scoring affair, it seemed like.
20-14, yeah. Or 13, 20-13, yeah. I think they have the better team. I think, with a game under their belt, they're going to be even tougher. I'm concerned about the field, but, both teams have to play with it. I like our defense against Foles more than I liked Atlanta's defense against Foles. The offensive line will have to hold up against against the front of the Eagles, which is pretty tough. They rush 4 and they don't blitz a whole lot, but they still get home, so they're going to have to be concerned with that. And hopefully they can run the ball a little bit to keep their balanced offense, because that's how the whole thing works. And ultimately, like I said it earlier, if they don't turn the ball over, I think they win, because they're not going to score a lot, but they'll score enough. And some teams have done real well against them, others haven't, but that's why they play the games. We'll see what happens.
It seems like me, with the Carolina game notwithstanding, when Case Keenum has a good first quarter, first half, first couple of drives, that's when he tends to turn the ball over in the second half. He's got that. My dad always says he reminds him of Favre, just without the arm. He kind of is just used to throwing the ball up and being successful. So I know you labeled it as panic because he was pressured on the interception, but I think that was a mix of panic and overconfidence, just because things were.
I think he tried to throw it away, and the ball got away from him.
Well, he threw it off his back foot, trying to throw it away out of bounds, way downfield towards the receiver. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, he didn't throw it at the angle he wanted to. I think that one just got away from him.
So I was going to use that as kind of a way. I don't think with the field that the game's going to start out as great as the Saints game did. I don't think they're going to have as much success on offense moving the ball, which could. I'm trying to find a silver lining in that. Maybe Keenum will not start making wild throws like he has when he's had trouble. But yeah, I still think the Vikings are going to win. I think this is a lesser opponent than the Saints. They don't obviously have the offense. I know Foles is playing better, but they looked extremely beatable those last 3 games, and I think when it comes to other teams that we could have faced in the NFC, they don't scare me as much. So I do think the Vikings are going to win. I think it'll be. I hope to God, because I don't know if I can handle it. I think it'll be a low stress game. I'm picking the Vikings to win 27-10.
All right.
They'll score a lot and then sit on it and just destroy Foles, and then I'll be able to watch the game and take pictures of myself crying and all that. It'll be a strange experience. I mean, Luke, I want your prediction, but I also want to kind of feel like, what would you? I don't know how I'm going to react if that happens.
If they win?
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll find out.
Listen to my voice. I'm freaking out already, man. Like.
We'll find out. I got your Case Keenum silver lining for you. This is a game where the Eagles are going to get pressure, and we need a pressure eraser. Case Keenum's a pressure eraser. He's been good outside of the pocket. He's been good at avoiding sacks. Pro Football Focus had a whole article about like the key factor for every team, and it was Case Keenum outside the pocket. He can scramble. He can do stuff. He showed it last week. He showed it all season. That's your Case Keenum silver lining. I think you're putting a little bit too much stock into the field. It'll have an effect. It'll have more of an effect on the defense. But here's the thing. Nick Foles is the kind of quarterback you can blitz. You can't blitz Drew Brees. You can blitz Nick Foles.
That's right.
And you can get pressure on him. And you know who falls apart to pressure? Nick Foles. He's been dreadful under pressure, where Case Keenum's had one of the shallowest drop-offs in the league between being clean and being under pressure, which is a pretty good indicator. Last week, and I know that goes up against there's a stat going around from the Saints game where he had a 5.1 passer rating under pressure. He only completed like 3 passes, and he had that bad pick. That was the outlier. He's been pretty good under pressure all season, and also passer rating under pressure is one of the least sticky stats. It's very, very volatile, so it's not really good for it's good for describing a game, but not really good for predicting future ones. Passer rating, while kept clean, is way, way more sticky, and Case Keenum's been one of the better clean passers in the league.
So what's your are you going to make a bold prediction?
Yeah. So in case you can't tell, I have the Vikings winning again. I think we can stop their run game better than Atlanta did, and they hadn't really been able to run post-Wentz until that game, and I think that was more of a fluke than not. I think we'll be able to stop the run. I think we'll be able to put the game in Nick Foles' hands, and I don't think Nick Foles is going to have the skill set to pull it together and win an NFC Championship game at home. That frankly both teams are lucky to be in. And I think the defense has learned a pretty good lesson, and I think they man up really interestingly against those wide receivers. We didn't really get a chance to talk about it, but Rhodes on Jeffrey is a fun matchup from the days of old. Nelson Aguilar on Trey Waynes is really fun. They've got a lot of weapons, and they do have a really good roster and a really good defense. I think it'll be closer than both of you guys predicted. But
No.
my bold prediction is that neither passer is going to throw an interception. Neither Nick Foles nor Case Keenum will throw an interception in this game.
Wow.
And I think that's the kind of straight up and down legitimate contest that, the better roster will just kind of win, and it won't be particularly interesting. I think it'll be closer than a touchdown ultimately, but it won't be like this, nail biter, like crazy, like the Bortles Roethlisberger gun fest that we saw on Sunday afternoon. So I have the Vikings win, and I have neither Keenum nor Foles throwing an interception.
Speaking of bold predictions, Joe, I had one at the halfway point of the season that these two teams would meet in the playoffs, and when they were of course they were 7-1 and 6-2 at the time, so not entirely too bold, but I said they were on a
super proud of the fact that you picked the number 1 and number 2 teams in the NFC to end up in the NFC Championship.
It would have been a lot bolder if you said it after Carson Wentz went down.
Yes, yeah. I didn't retract it. How about that?
I'm not gonna lie though, man. You've been pretty spot on. Obviously, the predictions situation was a disaster for me. I know we did that last week. I think I lost again. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Oberle, but you were both very close.
Yeah.
Oberle missed by 9 and Johnson missed by 13.
Ugh. This week I'll be right, and I do, since we're up against the clock, I do want to thank our listeners for going on this journey with us. It's been a magical season, and it just feels really surreal and amazing to be a part of this, and also be at the point where I'm actually considering what I'm going to do if the Vikings end up winning the Super Bowl because of the name of the website. It might not make a whole lot of sense after that. So, I definitely want to thank the people that have been sticking with us and the new listeners from the Vikings territory crowd that have been joining us too. That means a lot to us. We really believe in our show, obviously, and so it's been really cool. But definitely check in next week. Follow us. We're going to be writing like crazy. We'll be doing a live chat of the NFC Championship. If you're as lonely as I am and you don't really want to be around people, join us there. But yeah, just check out our articles on purplePTSD.com, also on VikingsTerritory.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter at purplePTSD, and we'll be back next week, hopefully celebrating one of the most amazing moments in, especially Luke and our lives. But this has been the Purple Journal Podcast, and thanks for listening.